While Deltarune Chapter 3 isn't out yet, we do know a lot about the chapters after Chapter 2. And more importantly, we know enough to semi-predict the rest of the game's overarching story. Let's start off with the legend. The legend tells us a lot of info that we wouldn't know otherwise about the game's overarching narratives. To be more specific, we know about what will happen and how they will fix it. Nearing the middle of this cutscene at the beginning of the game, it mentions the balance of light and dark, more specifically what would happen with its shadows, and what would happen with the shadows is not very good. Now, why is this important to this story? Well, obviously, the legend is talking about Chris, Lalsei, and Susie. For example, in the story, it mentions that 3 heroes will fix this, these obviously being Lalsei, Susie, and Chris. Now, you can tell this by the way that they look, by the fact that Lalsei is described as the Prince of the Dark. It just makes sense. Later in the legend, it mentions some new fountains, or the fountain that appears in the first chapter, and with this, it mentions that the balance of light and dark is starting to shift. Now, if this is correct, it implies that the story of Deltarune is going to be, well, a dark one. More specifically, one where the Earth nearly dies. And perhaps it's your choice in the game whether you want to save the world or if you don't. From a game design perspective, this would be a reasonable way to make the story shift to a more negative tone. It would also not be too much of a shock based on the fact that this game is created by Toby Fox, the guy that made Undertale. This would also match up with some of the more eerie Deltarune Easter eggs, such as when you delete a file, it basically saying it was as if it was gone for good, or the beginning being labeled contact. Also, on the beginning being labeled contact, context usually implies 2 people knowingly interacting. That's not a dictionary definition, but I'm just going to use it. Now, this could be a stretch, but if the person in the character creator thing in Deltarune is Gaster, maybe we weren't the only ones searching for contact. If I'm going to be honest, the likelihood that I'm correct in this is low, but it's not impossible. The reason it's not impossible is because I just don't believe that Toby Fox would just leave a detail like that in it and just not expand on it, not have a reason for it to be there. Toby Fox usually has a reason for every detail to be there. So, like, we can hope.